Welcome everybody. This is the November edition of the Perfect Tasting Box without Chris Delalon, Master Sommelier, which is disappointing, but nevertheless, we have to carry on. And we are tasting Bordeaux wines today. Just going to go through the 3 wines which are in this month's tasting box. We are going with left bank, right bank, and back to left bank. Shall we crack on with wine number 1? If you guys have all 3, and if you have 3 glasses, like Katie doesn't, but everyone else probably has 3 glasses, it's probably makes sense to pour them into the glasses already, because I think it's probably an easier way to do it, and then it let the wine breathe a little bit as well, because the last one is actually 10 years old now, so it's quite a big boy. And then let's see how they actually work. So wine number 1 is obviously, can't even pronounce it properly because I'm not French like Chris, but never mind. Château, I would say it's pretty close. Anyone, whoever speaks French, please tell me. It's from the Haut-Médoc, so we are in left bank, and the left bank is obviously, when we studied this, I think, at least when I studied it a decade ago or even longer, the left bank, we always learned to establish right bank is north of the river and left bank is south of the river, and with right bank is more dominant with Merlot, and the left bank is more dominant with Cabernet Sauvignon. Make it easy to remember is Cabernet Sauvignon is usually the darker fruit character. At least it's in the blend, that's what it dominates, and that part needs a bit more sunshine, a bit more warmth, and usually the left bank is a little bit warmer than the right bank. This is a very, very, very easy way to understand, although it's not exactly correct, because there's different reasons behind where they plant, what they plant, and there are historical reasons as well, and there are just simple practical reasons how they plant grapes in Bordeaux. But generally, I think everybody is a wine drinker here, so I assume we all know that Bordeaux is gonna be always a blend, and the main grape varieties are obviously Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc. They use a bit of Petit Verdot, Malbec, Carmenère, and then I can't even remember what else is allowed in the blend at the moment. If anyone knows, please hands up or just shout in, because I'm more than happy to listen to anyone. And in this case, it's more Merlot dominant, which is not necessarily always the case, or most often it's not the case with the left bank, but in the Haut-Médoc is often Merlot dominant. And how easy to pick Merlot in a blend is usually if you get a bit more of that sort of ripe red fruit rather than dark fruit character to it. But as it's always a blend, it's always going to be somewhere down the line, both of them. So I think in this case they use Merlot, Cab 7, Cab Franc, so it's a very classic blend in this wine. And as Chris usually say, north to south, so eyes, the nose, and the palate. And on the nose, I think, yeah, there's loads of fruit already. A bit of that sort of herbal notes, a bit of that sort of fragrant, perfumed character, which is probably from the Cabernet Franc, actually, because that's what you usually get from these sort of wines, or sort of from the grape variety itself. And then yeah, a bit of obviously a bit of sweetness on the nose immediately as well. but that's from the aging process as well, again. And yes, I just opened this. I almost said I opened this bottle, but I didn't open the bottle. I opened the box. But yes, very classic Bordeaux. That sort of, I think the acidity is quite high, at least for me. I'm still salivating, which is for red wine, it's quite, I think it's quite high. At least this is how I feel, but it's all subjective anyway. It is a little bit young, yes, exactly. Although the tannins are not too bad. 2018, which is, you know, it shouldn't be young anymore, but I think it still has time to. It's funny because when I think about Bordeaux, I don't really think about that sort of high acidity level, but it's probably something to do with the vintage. And again, it varies a lot from, obviously, from because Bordeaux is quite vast. If you look at it, so from one side to another, it could be very different as well. But yes, I agree. And yes, I think it's a good point on that sort of like herbal, sort of green, peppery sort of notes. And I think that's probably, again, something to do with the Cabernet Franc. I'm not sure what's the percentage in the blend, but I think it's it probably there's a fair bit in there. I always feel that Bordeaux always has a place in my heart. Maybe it's because I don't know why. It's because sometimes when I think about a wine, there are occasions when Bordeaux comes into mind immediately because it matches with certain types of food, or it's just certain occasions, and it reminds me of something, and I just like, oh, sugar, I really want a bottle of Bordeaux now. 4,500 hectares in Haut-Médoc, so it's quite a large, vast area filled with wine, obviously. Whereas when we go to Saint-Émilion, it feels smaller, but the vineyard area is actually very much the same. That would be in the Médoc. But obviously, Saint-Émilion is, I think if you ask anyone outside of Bordeaux, or maybe even in Bordeaux, you would say they would say that Saint-Émilion is the capital of Bordeaux, if you can say that. I don't know if it's because the wines they produce there, or just the town itself, but I think Saint-Émilion is definitely the capital of Bordeaux wine region in many ways. So in the second wine, again, we are in 2020 vintage. Yes, 2020 vintage, and this is going to be a more Merlot dominant wine. Wine number 2 is La Croix Saint Christophe. I'm so good at French as well, unbelievable. We're talking about £30.95 in a full price, so we are talking about a little bit more expensive wine at this point. In here, the wine, I actually tasted this wine yesterday. I had to do a quick video of something, and I just picked up a wine from a box, and I just that was the actual wine by accident. So I already tasted the wine before, and I was so surprised because for me it was such it felt so light, but maybe it was just the time of the day. Obviously, for me, the nose is a little bit more closed than on the previous one. Still, obviously, red fruit mainly. It doesn't have that sort of burning sensation in the back. We're missing a little bit of the balance, which actually I think it could come down to the aging as well, because it's still a young wine. 2020 is still young. It could evolve a lot more, but I think it's how I felt is very silky, subtle style of wine, a little bit more sort of very red fruity sort of. I think the raspberry, I agree with that tasting note big time. For me, this would be more of a, again, different types of occasions, I think. And I don't really want to get very deep into that, because poor Katie had to sit through one of my talks the other time when I was talking about how I can imagine a certain wine sitting on a beach with a roaring fire. It's funny, I often do this with wine. It just reminds me of something, and I can imagine doing something, eating something, being with friends or family or wherever. And I quite like these sort of it's almost like a scene from a film or scene from a movie, where you like imagine drinking that wine somewhere. Because for me, a wine is not just a drink. Ooh, that sounded so good. It's not just a drink, but it's very much of an experience where you can actually just go through so many other things, and wine has to almost be in the background for me very often. I don't know if you guys agree with this or not, but obviously it's an important factor when we're doing a wine tasting. But for me, in terms of as an element of drinking wine, it shouldn't be the number one thing in the picture. In terms of number 3, so we obviously Saint-Julien, 38.95, so quite hefty price tag. Well, not compared to most Bordeaux, but we're still in a very exciting territory. Mm-hmm. Back to left bank, obviously, a little bit more further from the Atlantic, but probably a little bit closer to the river itself. So that would probably bring a little bit more acidity into play. And then the fruit on this one is obviously bigger, riper, juicier. I think it's a bit more that sort of plummy style of wine. A bit more stewed fruit, maybe. Slightly, I don't like to use this term, but slightly overripe. A bit more development, obviously, on the nose as well. So you have this sort of either tobacco, sort of chocolatey notes on the nose as well. I think already, compared to the previous 2, the nose is a lot more exciting for me, at least. It tells a lot, immediately tells me it's going to be a bit bigger, a bit more exciting wine, obviously a bit more age to it as well. So obviously a lot more complex wine than the previous ones. It's very subtle in many ways, but maybe because of the complexity of the wine. But I'm going to disagree with you. I'm very happy to drink it on its own. I love the complexity of it. I love the layers, and I love the fact that it still has fruit in it after 10 years. Obviously, there's no reason why it shouldn't have, because these wines can age very nicely, obviously. But I think it's the wine itself, obviously on the color as well. My lighting is terrible as well, but on the color as well, there's obviously development on the wine. On the nose, obviously suggests age and oak treatment as well. Obviously has that sort of sweetness and everything. It has a bit of sweetness, but it's just the right amount of sweetness. So it's not just a bag of sugar in one corner of your palate. It's actually a very well-rounded sort of, I don't know, it's almost like, again, it's silly. I shouldn't start this, but I can imagine this walking in a forest, sort of like forest flowers and forest fruits in there, and and it has that sort of slightly herbal backbone as well, which I found quite interesting. I never tasted this one. The previous two I tasted before, and I never tasted this. Obviously, they never send me the good stuff. It's just like always the cheap stuff. It's like, okay, do something with this. No, I'm just joking. But they do send me some very nice wines actually. But I never tasted this wine before. Obviously, we're talking about £40, close to £40 here, so it's going to be a little bit more exciting. But the whole area as well, Saint-Julien, is very much compared to the previous two, where we're talking about like 4,500-5,000 hectares of vineyard area generally, as the regional, sub-region, or AOC, or whatever you call it. Here we're less than 1,000 hectares, so it's a lot smaller area, a lot more concentrated. One thing which is very interesting with this wine is the guy who works on it, Eric Bossino, yeah, that's his name. So he's a wine consultant who worked with, I believe, 4 of the 5 first growth producers. So that is probably a very good resume which he has in. And see, this is where I start to appreciate Bordeaux. This is definitely a massive step from the previous two. A slightly more underrated area. You get better value for money, whereas if you go into Saint-Émilion, you pay a little bit more. Obviously, different style of wine, both of them, but I think they were sort of on the same level. And here we have a massive step up. Whether it's the quality on its own or that 10 years which they actually which we can experience here in terms of complexity and development in the wine, that's different issue. But I think it's this is definitely a massive step up from the previous two wines. I was surprised when I first tasted these packages as well, because I was skeptical, because shouldn't say this, I'm 40 years old, and I grew up with bag-in-a-box being cheap and cheerful, and 5 liters, and drink it in university. Yes, I did it. But this is bag-in-a-box, and it's not, nothing wrong with it. A £40 bottle of wine tastes brilliant in this one. Hope you guys enjoy the wines. Thank you for joining.
Cheers.
Bye.
See you later. Bye-bye.